We don't know the exact cause of this, do we?
No.
No.
Hypermobility.
Right. Give them the lowdown on the foot thing.
So I notice it when I'm working. My feet, it feels like the arches are tearing. So,
Which way? Like wide or long?
yeah, like it's being stretched way too. I have high arches. When I'm working and I'm like this, I feel it in the back foot, but I notice that I'm rotating my knee in, so it's starting to roll the ankle and collapse the arch.
Yeah.
So that's probably not,
Is that a compensation thing you're doing for the pain?
I don't know. I don't think so, but it's not helping, because you can see how it's putting the pressure where it shouldn't be.
When you tilt your knee in like that, does it reduce any of the pain in the back foot?
No.
No. Okay.
So it's also, I feel it in my ankles. Calves are always tight, and because I am trying to compensate for the pain, I'm twisting a little, so my back's starting to hurt.
When did it start?
About a week ago. It happens every 6 months for me though. So I'm thinking shoes.
So it's something that reoccurring. So
Yes.
it did not. So a week ago, it didn't really start a week ago.
Yeah, when did the symptoms
It
first start doing
you
it?
First
encounter
start,
it every so often.
probably a couple years ago.
But right there actually is a pretty important assessment. Is it something brand new, or is it reoccurring? If it's something that's been familiar and has reoccurred in cycles, even if it's changed a little bit, but it's familiar, that's something to not be quite as concerned about. It's something that they have been fighting with related to either an activity they regularly do, or it's just how, anatomically we're born with something that's not going to be, perfect all the time, right?
So does that fall under chronic pain or acute pain? Because it comes and goes, but like she's been dealing with it for years.
Yeah, so it would be a condition management kind of situation. Chronic would be, you can't escape from it. Like, it takes a lot to, so I wouldn't quite categorize it as chronic as opposed to it's a mildly chronic condition, but if there have been stretches where there weren't symptoms. So it's really trying to find, we know that the area has a tendency towards pain behavior, but there have been ways to manage it in the past. The annoying part for anybody though is when the management strategy that did work for a while starts to not work anymore. And then you're having to find a new management strategy with that. This one, I don't think it's that, certainly not yet by any means. I know I've had that, where I had a management thing for a while with areas, and then I had to find a new way because it wasn't working anymore, So knowing that that's there, now kinetic chain wise, anything in the foot and ankle is gonna mess with everything else. So the lower in the kinetic chain, the more body wide the effect tends to be. And you could pretty much say that with anything from the ankle, knee, hip, and low back area. Above that, into the shoulders, sometimes it can be more isolated. You can have things that are a bit more isolated in the neck and shoulders that don't travel down as often. But stuff that starts low will certainly start to mess with everything higher up.
Because of gravity.
You say it's your back foot too. Is it both feet? So
It's
no matter
both
what the
feet.
back, so like both your knees, do both knees tilt in?
They will, and I try and catch myself, but as I'm even standing here, I'm noticing they start to,
Like you're trying to escape that
well,
stretching
they
pain?
just naturally want to roll in.
Huh.
So I have a history of this ankle was broken,
Okay.
played sports, twisted ankles, I don't know how many times. So there's hypermobility and laxity there.
Do you
And-
also have hypermobility in your hips, like outwards? I
Everywhere.
know you say you have pain in your right hip, left hip, left hip.
And related to hypermobility, which when you have a person or an area that tends towards hypermobility, the thing to not do is to stretch it. Because the stuff that's probably too long, structurally, forever too long, either you're born that way or through repeated injury, it's become permanent. it's tendon and ligament structures, especially when ligament structures are too long. These are the structural pieces that just bracket your joints together, right? They're not about movement, they're about stability and allowance for movement, but they're about just sticking one bone to another bone. And the tendons function in very similar ways. But we don't need to be, this is a big one I'm saying to you, don't mess too much with ligaments and tendons, at least not to start. Like, worry about the muscle and tissue in between, because that's the stuff that you can affect. Muscle tissue is about shortening and lengthening. So I get frustrated with the idea that people want to treat stuff with stretching. Stretching focuses the tension at the joint line, which means that the stress is going to be on the ligament and the tendon. And temporarily it'll feel okay, but it's not going to help. Here, yeah, there's underlying hypermobility, and that will probably, it's a forever issue for anybody, right? But can we find a way that the rest of the body can just adapt to this more effectively? The orientation of the knees, or let me make sure I don't digress too much. In general, letting the collapsing inward is a tendency that we have because the adductors are big and powerful, and they can be used for additional stability. I mean, I can kind of just pull my legs in, and that kind of makes me solid to the ground. But you can see what happens to my ankles, and it offsets the hips and everything. A thing to always remember is these big muscles that we can't very easily lengthen in day-to-day life, like adductors, tend to get chronically really short on everybody, even though we don't tend to feel the symptoms there. You're not going to hear too many people say, here, they may have like groinish stuff or medial knee stuff. They won't say, I feel tight here. They'll say, I have something here in my shoulder, even though they're short, tight here. But rarely you're going to have a person say, my pecs and my lats feel tight. Like these, because we just don't tend to raise our hands above our heads or kick out to the side, unless you're like a gymnast or something, right? Anyway, that begins to become part of the reason why you just are thorough in your application, your general full body application, because you can identify areas that just feel by region. Are the adductors feeling like they are more toned than, let's say, somewhere else, or overtoned, whatever? And that begins to be a part of your assessment. Now, to be more focused, we're going to go through these firing pattern sequences. It's a reason to throw muscle names at you, and then for me to give you the simplified versions of things. So we get to get her out of gravity.